My guest, Fred Cuny, is the founder and president of the Intertech Relief and Reconstruction Corporation, which is based in Dallas.
He's a disaster relief specialist, traveling the world to help countries recover from the ravages of nature.
It was one more job for a man whose business is disaster.
His take on emergencies is to normalize the situation as rapidly as possible.
He has a deeply felt emotional and humanitarian commitment.
It sometimes seems as if Fred Cuny is trying to respond personally to all the needy parts of the world.
My dad grew up with a kind of big extended family around him. His Uncle Phil was a Marine pilot. Fred was just enthralled with Uncle Phil. He just thought he hung the moon. I think it was part of that sense of adventure that Fred had that was just like, wow, this guy's seen the world, he flies jets, and you know, he just thought that that was the coolest thing in the world. So he wanted to be a Marine pilot. Fred was very much a child of the Cold War and then early, stages of Vietnam. That war was starting to become unpopular, and I think he just took pause and looked at everything in a whole new light.
His friend of Fred's was working in the Biafra conflict and actually invited him to come over because it was a chance to do some flying. And when Fred was there, he saw how things were mismanaged.
You know, people would be good-hearted and they'd want to send as much aid as they possibly could, but much of it might be very inappropriate.
They sent in instant mashed potatoes. And what happened in the field was they didn't know what instant mashed potatoes were. Nobody explained to them, so they thought that it was soap, and they were washing their clothes with instant mashed potatoes.
You can't send canned goods to places where people don't have can openers, or you can't send pork to Muslim countries where they don't eat pork.
Fred sent letters and really angry communications to some of the heads of these organizations, and he ticked a lot of people off.
We're probably losing close to 1,000 people a week, and this is just unacceptable from all of our points of view.
Fred was impatient with people who didn't really try to see things differently or see things the way that maybe he saw them.
They're like, who is this guy? What basis do you have? And he's like, well, just look. But it took time for that momentum to swing to people said, hey, okay, this guy may be a little, half-cocked, but he's on to something.
Civil war has been raging in Bosnia for more than 6 months now, since the republic declared its independence from Serbia and the rest of Yugoslavia.
This is what it's like to be in Sarajevo tonight. 300,000 people are trapped in the city. Food is scarce, water supplies have been cut.
We are starving. We have no food, no water, no electricity. We have nothing.
Most of Sarajevo's population is Muslim. Ever since the 14th century, they've been central to the city's artistic, business, and political life. Muslims are attacked here. That's why you let them kill us for 9 months. You should have done something at the very beginning of the war. But the world did not.
Imagine one thing, in '84, Sarajevo hosted Winter Olympic Games. Whole world was there. That was a great time, right? And now imagine 8 years later, on these same mountains where you had Olympic Games, we have howitzers and we have mortars and we have soldiers fighting us and shooting us and bombing us. It was unbelievable.
United Nations troops on the ground in Bosnia-Herzegovina counted 1,000 shells fired by Serbs which fell on Sarajevo today alone.
Every square inch of this town is gridded by the Serb artillery. They have every bit of it under control and can hit any place in the city anytime they want.
Fred was actually visiting Sarajevo in some kind of mission to research what can be done. He always told me, first thing that I saw was people going down to river and, taking some buckets of water and taking it home. And he said, I saw some woman, who was carrying that bucket, and sniper hit her, and just she laid on the ground.
Almost 90% of the casualties have occurred in this particular region.
And are in search of?
In search of water and fuel.
Fred Cuny, a Texas engineer, designed a water system that could be flown in. It takes river water and pumps it through filtration modules hidden in a tunnel.
He wanted to bring water back into the people's homes so they don't get outside. They're not exposed to fire from snipers and don't get killed there.
Do you feel like you're saving lives with this project?
That's exactly what it is, a humanitarian project designed to reduce casualties and to provide safe drinking water to the people of Sarajevo.
The project really got started when Chris Cuny called me from Paris one day. I was sitting at the office and a call came in. I thought he was calling from Paris, Texas. I put him on hold.
Terry's an engineer. He's one of those guys that basically knows just a little bit about a lot of things.
And it became apparent that he was calling from Paris, France, and he said, I think I've got a project that I want you to look into.
I know Fred was thrilled because he finally had somebody that I think he could bounce ideas off on that could implement those ideas.
This was a 5 million gallon a day water treatment plant, so that's capable of serving about 500,000 people, and we had to fly it in. We had never done that before. I don't think anybody had done that before. The first time we went to Sarajevo, we had a design meeting. It was a little bit disturbing simply because the conference room we had to meet in and go over this thing didn't have any windows in it because they all been blown out. In fact, while we were sitting there, a mortar round landed about 200 or 300 feet away, and those folks had been shot at so much they didn't even jump. I was ready to get under the table. I said to Fred once when I was over in Sarajevo and we were sitting in his house that actually he was renting while he was there. It had no utilities, it had no lights, no water. And I said, Fred, why are you doing this? Why are you over here, away from home, sitting in this place where you get shot at and it's pretty miserable? And he says, I just can't stand to see people dying.
Just the fact that someone is able to share all the risk of war with you, not thinking about his life, whether he will get injured or not. Why would someone come from nice, peaceful life of Dallas, in a hell to live with you there? You have to be a really humanitarian to do that. So.
Amir was a mechanical engineer. He was totally committed to the city, and he was basically Fred's right-hand man.
Fred is a person who always wants things to be done quickly and fast. It's like, I'm asking you to do this, keep it simple, do it fast. Where Bosnian government and government officials, they are slow. And Fred had to remind them very often, this is wartime, we're trying to help, we're trying to keep this simple, this is not going to be a commercial water plant.
Fred wanted Demir to come in and see what we were building and begin to get an idea of what he was going to be up against in being in charge of getting this thing erected once it arrived in Sarajevo.
I remember Fred pulling me back just before I left on a plane He said, "Will you promise me one thing?" I said, "Okay, what's that?" He said, "Are you promising that you're coming back?" Because you see, a lot of young people have chance to leave the country and they just say at the airport, "Hasta la vista, I'm going on my own." I said, "Fred, I have my parents here, I have a girlfriend here, and I have this project. I'm coming back." My first impression of Texas, it is hot. And then from there we went to Houston. It was even worse. It was hot and humid.
My first job out of college, I was the weekend weatherman, and I wasn't quite sure I'd made the right decision. I knew I enjoyed video work, but I just felt like I kind of needed a big change. I wasn't going anywhere real fast.
Fred early on had helped Craig in his video production business and supplied him with a camera. He commissioned Craig to come over and film the water project.
He was really excited because he'd always wanted me to kind of go into what he called the family business. Fred was obviously in something that was hard to understand if you weren't there. I think that he always kind of wanted people to come to him, so he did everything he could to let me know that that was a cool idea.
You hear a lot about Sarajevo. Tonight we want to take you there. We want to show it to you by looking down from above at this three-dimensional model. Sarajevo lies below the mountain, now overlooked directly by Serbian gunners in the hills above. Farther down the road is one of the most dangerous stretches of road in the world today. They call this Sniper Alley. And right around the corner from Sniper Alley, sandwiched between the Serbian guns on one side and the Bosnian guns on the other, is the Sarajevo airport, where Allied planes try to land most days.
Do the opposing forces know that something like this is going to come in?
The water project's been announced, and we have a number of people that have been notifying the Serbs that we intend to do a big water project in the city.
So I said to the manufacturer and the designer, it looks great, but the point is that it looks like a base for a rocket launcher. So the point is that I hope that the Serbs will understand what it's used for,
One of the most impressive things about the water project was not just how big it was and how amazing it was to build these huge components that were going to get crammed into the back of a C-130, but you were also supposed to take them off in the middle of a potentially hot war zone while the airplanes are still running, and then get a truck in front of them and drag them through town, all in something like 18 minutes.
We didn't know whether this equipment was going to work or not. In theory, it worked. All the engineering said it was going to work. You know how it is when you try to get something on the ground in a situation which you've never been in before. Is it going to work?
We first practiced that at the airport for 2 days. Literally, drill after drill.
There were some times where we thought we may get this far and this is going to be too slow of a process, and the guys at the airport there are going to shut us down. It was unbelievable to think about moving this thing in an hour, much less this amount of time.
So we were loading that and unloading and loading and unloading whole day until we finally were able to have all members of these crews totally synchronized to do what they need to do.
Next thing I know is Fred says, "Well, let's go." I said, "Well, Fred, where are we going? We're going to take this unit into Sarajevo right then." So we all piled on the C-130 and we take this unit in.
Imagine 20 planes, 20 landings, 20 unloading, none of them with any difficulties or problems or mishaps or anything.
Well, once it had arrived, I was on either by fax or on the phone with Demir, working through the problems of getting everything assembled.
We worked on that for quite a few months, to install all that equipment. Both Fred and us as an engineer were under extreme challenge to get that finished with very limited resources there in wartime.
Somewhere else, diplomats may have been preparing their feasibility studies on airstrikes. But here in Sarajevo, where NATO planes were flying lower over the city, people were more concerned with the actual than the feasible. It was another day of actual shelling, actual sniping, actual death.
We were running on a meeting with officials, Sarajevo city officials. And on our way there, we were driving in a car and shelling started. Here we are with our car going to the meeting, and we see people lying on the street. Fred said, forget the meeting, we go and help these people. And of course, we were late on the meeting. We have city mayor, very upset, very nervous. Mr. Cuny, do you think that you could be late on a meeting with mayor of Dallas if you're in America? And Fred got really upset there. He said, you know what, we're not in America, we are in Bosnia and we are in war. I was helping your citizens to come to hospital so they don't die on the street. He never liked how the Bosnian officials acted upon that, and relationship really went south there.
The water system is complete. We've had a real hard time with the local authorities, mainly because there's a dispute about what kind of standards the water system should meet and the difficulty of actually proving those under combat conditions.
We did all the testing, and all these tests were showing that water is perfectly fine. And then we were asking ourselves, okay, why we have all these blocking, from the local government?
The rumor was that the local officials were making money off the sale of water, and at the design bureau, a lot of those folks were expecting to get paid. There was no bribery, and we didn't pay out any bribe. We were, and I'm diametrically opposed to that.
As a Bosnian, you work all that project with your dream to help your people, to save someone's life. So for me, it was devastating.
But beyond my understanding is why they were having that trouble, and I'm sure it was terribly frustrating for Fred.
Fred goes on a meeting and he yells at them and he argues with them and he tells them openly what he thinks about them, and he doesn't care. He storms out. So I come later on and talk to him, you are the one here who has to be more diplomatic, and he said, F them, I don't care, stuff like that, his way or highway, it was always with Fred.
I talked to Damir, he goes, your dad went up one night, he was determined to turn the water system on by himself. And I said, yeah, that doesn't surprise me, so what did he do? And he goes,
he just wanted the water to flow in that reservoir. I remember it was middle of the night. We drove with our car to the reservoir building.
And he said, screw it. It's all working. It's operational. He goes, I'm going to do it. And apparently, at first, nobody wanted to go with him.
If that were done in the United States, you'd be arrested. It'd be criminal mischief.
He said, I don't care. And he apparently charged up there and started hitting buttons and everything else.
Fred finally said, okay, we don't care what you're doing. We're turning this thing on and we're pumping it up to the reservoir. And that's what he did. He just turned it on.
You can tell people whatever you want. No matter what government was telling people, people start drinking water at their homes, and they felt fine. Nothing happened.
Fred was never one to put up with a lot of bureaucracy. He felt it was the right thing to do, and he needed to get water to the people, so he was just going to suffer the consequences, whatever they would be, to just get the thing running and prove to everybody it was okay, and they'd realize that it was the right thing to do.
He was hell-bent on showing the world that, hey, you can't just go and cut off a city from basic things in life they need. The militaries and you armies can fight all you want, but somebody's going to answer the bell.